My past. I'm remembering bits and pieces of it, of who I was, before everything. The voices get louder and louder now, as if they're trying to fit into one large puzzle piece. Yes, it's all becoming clear to me now. I understand who I truly am. I am.
我はメシアなり
Ladies and gentlemen, Mega Man 03, and god, what a journey it has been to get to this point. With a debut title that left people impressed on a Mega Man platformer that was tough but still engaging enough for the player to experience at the time, to then having a sequel that ironed things out and provided a very refined touch on the formula, 03 is where Capcom truly created, in my opinion, its magnum opus. A game that every Mega Man or Zero fan knows to the bottom of their hearts to be considered the best of the franchise, and all for good reasons. As someone who has been involved with the Mega Man franchise since about the age of 5 or 6 more or less, I never really gauged or experienced something like Mega Man 03, which now after playing this game and all, it almost reached that level of high that I had when I first played Mega Man X4 or even the original Mega Man X back in the day. I say almost because for as much as I am willing to praise 03, it doesn't come close to the enthusiasm I had with the original X and even X4 growing up. Hell, I don't think any Mega Man game since then has come close to topping the king that is X4 now that I think about it, and I think that says a lot about who I am as a Mega Man fan. Now, could it be because I played the Zero series late into my video game career? It could be the case, but man, that doesn't mean I didn't feel the same type of vibes as I went through this one, front, back, centered, and all around. For as much as I consider 02 as my personal favorite, 03 is up there because of how well it delivered things from a gameplay perspective when it comes to both the Zero series and Mega Man in general. I know for a fact that I'm going to be describing it, Frame 1, as the genuine masterpiece of sorts when it comes to the entire Zero series, and honestly, that's really saying something. 03 by no means has its ups and downs, but considering how little I have to say about this development, let's just get cracking the whip and see what the story has cooking this time around. After some time processing the death of El Piso and the awakening of the Dark Elf, Zero and the Resistance base are now tying loose ends as they see from across a snowy field a dilapidated spacecraft that may or may not want to ask for Zero's bananas. Curious about the scene, they are greeted by the Guardians and Neo-Arcadian forces, but instead of asking for the usual buy one get one free set of package of hands, they immediately ask for a truce as a much bigger threat emerges from the depths within. Omega and Dr. Weil. Two evildoers that were once banished about a century ago due to their actions causing the Elf Wars, for which Dr. Weil conveniently seeks forgiveness for seeing that he so-called learned from his mistakes. Yeah, you ain't fooling me, buddy. With the help of the returning Copy X, now coming with a stutter, Dr. Weil actually wants to make his plans of world domination a reality as he seeks to capture the Dark Elf and use it to do its bidding, being the central focus of this game's goals. Now with the Guardians in temporary commission and with Zero taking the mantle as the legendary hero again, it's up to him to stop Dr. Weil, and really the story sort of pushes that narrative for like the rest of the game. Similar to 02, the story drives itself with the basis of your understanding of most of what is going on based on the initial cutscenes and stages with some subtext of the previous games. Zero may have a new foe to face and proceeds to save the world a third time around, but the stakes could not have been much higher. Unlike Copy X and El Piso, who were means to an end, Dr. Weil is the definition of an evil mastermind and one of my favorite antagonists of the entire franchise. Like, for one, he treats everyone like shit, and while it's one-note villainry, it works to the game's benefit because you're no longer dealing with a threat that can easily be avoidable, but instead this madman who's hell-bent on conquering the entire world. Dr. Weil does not care for anyone and nearly gets away with all of his schemes throughout the course of the story, making you question if he even is beatable. There's a moment where Dr. Weil makes a note that they had found the Dark Elf in a nearby residential area within Neo-Arcadia after you finish fighting Copy X, which his response to the matter? Nuke the whole place, holy fuck. Seriously, Dr. Weil blows up a whole neighborhood to get a hold of the Dark Elf and contain her within Omega, and that's some serious villainry there. I have never seen Dr. Wily or even Sigma of all antagonists to do the things Weil has done, and Sigma had a whole space colony be used as a meteor to destroy the Earth, which may or may not have happened, continuity depending. Meanwhile, Dr. Weil has the ability to control the entire Reploid population with a push of a button, using it to wag his finger at Zero like he's a puppy saying, "Oh no 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 no! Try me, bitch, or the whole world gets it." God, what a gaslighter. Copy X, like I mentioned, also returns, but he's more like a foil for Wiles' schemes. Being revived from the dead, since apparently the mad scientist can do that, Copy X takes his role as the leader of the Guardians in Neo Arcadia again, but is entirely under the thumb of Weil. He's such a pathetic whiner too, and it's funny when you read out the stutter in his dialogue since I guess Weil did not bother at all to patch that in his notes. Throughout the few times you even encounter him in the story, Copy X believes that he has everything under his control, especially when he uses Seal's renewable energy resource as a bargaining chip, all to make peace between the Resistance and Neo Arcadia. Seal naturally sets her foot down and says no to the matter, which Copy X takes it way too personally that even Michael Jordan would be impressed. Glad I got rid of him though, and for a while to even have that bomb strapped to him as he was unleashing his ultimate form. That was a sentence. But the main focus is both the Dark Elf and Omega, and I want to talk about the Dark Elf first because it seems that they answered a lot of my questions about its relevancy back when I first played Zero 2. Zero 2 played out the Dark Elf way too late into the story in my opinion, but Zero 3 makes it known that the hunt for the damn thing is on, as that's what Zero and Seal were doing in the beginning before meeting Omega and the Guardians. The Dark Elf has history and ties itself with the end of the Maverick Wars, as it was actually known as the Mother Elf, which brought Reploids out of their Maverick state and sort of cured them in the process. It wasn't until Dr. Weil stepped in and corrupted the Mother Elf into the Dark Elf as a means to use its power, starting the Elf Wars that X and Zero fought and won, but at the cost of Zero having to sleep for 100 years, and as we saw back in Zero 2, X having to use his physical body in order to contain it. But much like Zero 2 though, we end up learning about the Dark Elf's origin story much later in the story when we're dealing with our third set of bosses, and at that point, it doesn't feel impactful. Glad to see it's back to its normal status, but I couldn't really care less. Lastly, there's Omega, and holy shit, talk about a perfect antagonist for Zero. He doesn't talk much, if at all, other than a few growls here and there, but he doesn't need to since Omega proves to be a sort of plot device for Zero in terms of who Zero actually is in this game. I specify this game because we already know much about Zero in the X games, as he was created by Dr. Wily to be the ultimate killing machine before Sigma put him out of commission for a while back in X4. That, and he's able to repair himself while he hit himself in Mega Man X6. God, I'm not letting that one go, am I? But Zero 3 makes it damn clear the true potential of ultimate power through Omega, as it turns out that Omega not only possesses the power of the Dark Elf, but Weil made sure that Omega's true power was by harnessing Zero's original body. Oh yeah, we actually fight the original Zero, and all this time we were nothing but a copy, much like Copy X, but the difference is Zero retained his memories and soul while the original Zero body retained his original power. Now, who separated the two? Well, you tell me. Still, it is a tremendous plot twist because if we go by how strong Zero was by this point in the series, flexing towards the Guardians and even landing a few blows at Omega, just how strong was the original body? It's an interesting question that's answered through gameplay since he is the final boss after all, but also in scope of Zero's character, though quite frankly, it doesn't mean much to Zero in the end. Zero never really cared about whether or not he is the original Zero, and when he does learn that's not the case, he shrugs it off and proceeds to do his usual heroics because he understands that it's the mind and not the body that makes him who he is. And Zero's characterization is easily my favorite here. His dialogue reads more like how he was in the X4 to X8 days, and it does come off a bit like Shadow the Hedgehog from the Sonic franchise, depending on how you read it. Still, he's as cocky as ever, especially in this one moment where Harpuya is recovering from his wounds, and Zero just decides to approach him with a smirk on his face, all while saying, "Oh, you want more of this, huh?"
Oh my god, he's so goddamn cool!
And I have to say, the Omega boss fight, the final one I should stress, is easily the best one of the series. A true one-on-one with a Zero that has all your skills. It's a test of challenge and endurance that, paired with the music, hits deep in the core of the Mega Man fan that is inside of me. If you have a chance, and presumably after you finish watching this video, I highly recommend you watch the remastered animation that was done by Ultimate Maverick X, also here on YouTube. I'll even put a link in the description below, of just how he reanimated the whole fight between Zero and Omega here, and it was one of the biggest childhood experiences I've had, again, growing up with the Mega Man franchise, and honestly, it gives a pretty good representation of just how you feel when you initially experience this boss fight on your own. And the way Omega opened things up with him proclaiming to be the Messiah is just a cherry on top, and also says a lot about Wild in terms of how he warped Omega's mind. Omega claims to be a prophet for all Reploids, and Wild programmed him to believe that he is the one to usher in a new era, only for that to be proven wrong when Zero here saves the day. Once Omega is gone for good, and with the help of the Guardians and X, Zero then rescues the Mother Elf from a corrupted state and just goes off who knows where. And Zero, well, instead of pondering this time, he accepts his fate as the hero and continues to fight for the peace his friend longed to wish for. Man, that actually makes me feel a little bittersweet inside now that I think about it. With X and presumably the Guardians now gone, Zero is the only one left for the task as the legendary hero, and in a way, it feels like it's meant to be, sort of. An ending that might as well be a good conclusion to the franchise based on how much they tied up loose ends and sort of finalized things with how they were played out by the end. Then again, we have one more Zero game to cover after this, so I guess it doesn't mean much in hindsight and all, but you know, it's always a thought that counts. Still, based on the events of this game and how the previous game led things up to this point, it does feel like if the Zero games were to be a trilogy, this would have just been a perfectly good stopping point. As for gameplay on the other hand, man did they pop off here. The presentation, I have to say, is where Capcom took it to the next level when it came down to Mega Man aesthetics on the GBA. It may not look much, but once you experience that intro stage, you definitely feel like there have been massive changes all around, one of them being Zero's jump animation. I mean, is he trying to be a stripper all of a sudden? I don't know, he just kinda looks like he's pole dancing in midair. Where's the triple rod when you need it? You know what though, the game design feels refined compared to Zero 2's in combat, stage design, and boss fights, that this definitely is the epitome of the Zero series. I see now why many consider this to be the best Zero game, and it's because of all these three components working seamlessly and delivering on a time you definitely won't regret. For as much as I like Zero 2's game design, Zero 3 knocks it out of the park and improves a lot of what Zero 2 did right, that I spend so much time replaying Zero 3 as much as I did with Zero 2. I think the main reason why I even replayed this much is how the game starts you off with all your skills maxed out, so you can do the triple slash with no problem, as well as fully charge all your weapons. God bless you, Zero 3. The aggravation of having to slow things down to max out your weapons was a pain in the ass in the previous entries, and I'm just glad Capcom understood the assignment and just gave it to us from the get-go. Made using the other weapons easier and more reliable too, especially with Zero's latest weapon, the recoil rod. A pair of tonfas that when charged up can send enemies flying across the screen like they got hit by a damn truck. Look at them go! And when you press down on the D-pad too, you can even use it as a pogo stick for maximum platforming, which I used it to nab the 2 extra sub-tanks that you can get in stages because of that added reach and verticality, and it just feels funny seeing Zero possibly enjoying himself with a laser beam pogo stick by his side. If you're competent enough, you can go far with the damn thing, and paired with the future upgrades I'll talk more about it, like the double jump, you can gain so much airtime in just a few short seconds. I enjoyed this on my second playthrough because of how much range you can use this freaking thing and how easy it is to get some upgrades early on. And yeah, I said a second playthrough by the way, because man, does this game do it to you. The save files don't lie, and it's because of how well balanced the stages feel as well as how Mega Man-esque they are this time around. You're either in the usual old power plants or weapon factories, but now you have more ruins to explore like the Sunken Library with so much data that I'm surprised no archivist visited the location until now, a volcano base that has these melting platforms that require precise jumps, to a missile factory that at one point has you jumping on top of a rocket ship heading God knows where, but you gotta act fast or else you'll fall behind. I love traversing each stage as none of them give me second thoughts about their gimmicks because they feel so well integrated with the rest of the stage that I sometimes had to do a double take. Seriously, I never breezed through stages as fast as these, and with the right parts and weapons, it makes speeding through these an absolute blast, New Game Plus or otherwise. And I find their aesthetics to be more visually appealing compared to the other games in my opinion, with the exception of 04, which I'll obviously get to when we get there. The old residential area sticks out like a sore thumb in this case, mainly because it was the stage I used to farm E-crystals and nab that secret sub-tank, but but because of the visual fidelity of it, that makes it look gorgeous. Yeah, a whole city is in ruins, but with the overgrown foliage, the enemies running amok, and using your fire abilities to burn it to the ground, it feels so iconic for 03. And the missile factory bit with a rocket ship is truly stellar in both the set piece itself and the action having to go as the rocket is slowly removing the pieces it needed to go faster. I just love these moments so much. My one gripe about this though is the abuse of the mid-boss section, since I swear I don't understand why they had a hard-on for them. I get that for some, it adds an additional layer to the stage's layout, but every stage had one to the point where my PTSD from Mega Man X3 was kicking in to go all the way back to that video. Not a fan of most of them either, since they were tedious, like this one where it shoots goo at you to slow your movements down while you have to wait for it to open up to attack it. Or this one centipede mini-boss in the old residential area where it has one weak spot, making it a slog to kill because you have to wait for the perfect moment to throw a couple of slashes in, followed by a shield boomerang hit every now and then. It slows things down way too much to the point where it gets boring and ends up ruining the experience to some degree, depending on who you ask. And in my case, well, I want to get a move on, so fuck you, Desert Worm, go back to Dune. The music in this game is surely phenomenal though, easily the best of the franchise bar to none, which says a lot because of the fact that I'm even covering it now as opposed to before. I'm sure 01 and 2 had their tracks, 02 being the most apparent thanks to the opening theme Departure, but 03 just knew what they had to do in the sound department. They understood that as the peak of the franchise, they had to go all out, and that's what they did with the stage themes, boss fights, and even the Resistance bass. Listen, I was jamming out to the Resistance bass theme because of how much they care for the aesthetics this go around. The whole game wants you to feel like you're in the world of the Zero series, and paired with the stakes of the plot with Wild and Omega, all the more so. The final boss with Omega, again, to go back to that for a second, Cannonball just fits so well with the whole encounter. From start to finish, you're in hot pursuit of Omega, and he is to you, and the moment he gains his true form, the first few notes of that track followed by the piano keys afterwards shows that this is a fight to be remembered, up there with the X and Zero fight back in Mega Man X5. Hell, I'll even let you see what I mean here because it'd be such a crime for me to say all this and not even show you. Here, take a look at this. Man, is this some good ass final boss music. If you like, I even recommend listening to the Mythos version, since I think that was a thing for the Zero collection back on the Nintendo DS, which is a remastered version that is way more heavy metal based, but music in general here is just aces all around. New to 03 is also the cyberspace, where it's nothing but a green hue all over the stage, but you get to use all your cyber elves for a brief period of time. Nothing special besides these and the stupid green saturated backgrounds, but it makes going through stages easier if you don't want to fully use the elves and retain that A or S rank for those EX skills. And to be frank on the EX skills, again, I barely used them like in the previous games, and I learned in my third playthrough, yes, I did a third one off screen, you can gain the Rising Slash with this one Cyber Elf, which is fucking ridiculous for enemy control and boss fights. Seriously, this beats any EX skill out of the water, and all you need to do is to find the Cyber Elf for it and then proceed to show off like the Replo you're meant to be. And let's be honest here for a second, do you really need that S or A rank to have a good time anyways? But to go back to cyberspace though, I mostly use it to avoid certain hazards in my first playthrough, and they're a neat incentive to test out your cyber elves before deciding to sacrifice them for the greater good. Trust me, because sometimes the cyberspace levels will inadvertently save your ass, as it did mine during some portions of stages where it requires having to go through hordes of spikes like in the power plant during the endgame. Hell, in Area X2, the stage where you meet Copy X, I noticed the amount of spikes in the stage that I was suddenly feeling uneasy, so yeah, to cyberspace I went. Thank God I had that cyber elf that lessens spike damage too, because without it, oh, it would have been a pain in the ass, let me tell you. But I like that cyberspace is essentially a testing ground for cyber elves and whether or not it affects your rank, which who really gives a shit? I think it's just a great idea all around to let players lean into the schematics of each cyber elf before fully diving in deeper. And the cyber elves here, man, are they the best they can be in this series. I found them much easier now thanks to the secret discs you find scattered in a stage where you open up at the end of it as a reward for going the extra mile, and other stuff too like enemy files. I know it's a tangent here, but I like the secret secret discs here, as it gives Servo some screen time since you have to talk to him in order to decipher them. Get cool trinkets too, like extra E-crystals, special cyber elves, and enemy files. Did that one just say purple nurple? No longer do you need to go to Seal every time you feed Cyber Elves E-crystals and download the damn thing too. You can just do that on the fly now and feed them E-crystals whenever the hell you want, and this is by far the greatest improvement. I hated spending time in previous games going to specific stages to farm E-crystals to then work my way to Seal to get the upgrades going, and 03 made sure that you take care of all of that frame 1. The E-crystal quota is also massively smaller than previously, allowing getting most, if not all, your upgrades earlier on, and it makes having to do grinding for them easier because they don't need that much. By endgame, I was swamped with so many extra E-crystals that I didn't know what to do with them. In addition to fusing Cyber Elves, you also have this satellite feature, which for certain, if not all elves, I'm not sure on that one though, you can use them in 2 slots and not have to sacrifice them at all. I didn't use this a whole lot since I ended up fusing the Cyber Elves, but I did enjoy having my buddy Slope here giving me extra life energy as I'm busy tearing down bosses. A true soldier that little guy was, and I commend you for your services. Yet the idea of having satellite cyber elves is actually a pretty good idea all around, you know, let the player decide how they want to utilize each cyber elf and prioritize the ones that either need to be fused or can be switched on and off. To me, this adds great replayability because now you want to know which elves are worth the risk of using with Zero and others you can use on the off chance you need them, like faster ladder climbing or extra health perks to even straight up have additional health without needing to. The possibilities are endless now with cyber elves, and I think this works a lot to the benefit of 03's replayability and just general gameplay design. Similar to X5 and X6, we have the return of the part system, and I think this is where 03 truly does the part system much better than those games. As you beat each stage, you collect certain parts that allow Zero to harness all sorts of useful upgrades in addition to the cyber elves. This comes with the usual elemental chips, now swapping Zero's color palette as did the forms back in 02, plus a few additional ones like this absorber chip that allows Zero to not get recoil damage when hit. It's standard stuff that you'll get comfortable using since it's what you know best with the Zero series so far. The foot and head upgrades though, they are what you're going to be using the most in my opinion, and all for good reasons. The head upgrades allow for Zero to get a quicker charge rate going as well as an auto charge that charges your weapons automatically. I mean, it says it right there, auto charge, right? This helped me out tons in boss fights, especially in the boss rush bit, since at that point I wanted to finish the game as fast as possible, and being able to use all my weapons in their maximum power was a blessing in and of itself. As for the foot pieces, well, to be honest, you only really need one, and that's the double jump. Yes, the double jump is here, and it helps so much with platforming by the time you get it that it was my most used foot part because of it. And like I said earlier in the video, add that with a charge recoil rod and you are going places, my friend, which speaks volumes to the amount of diversity you have in this game alone. And if you're really lucky like me, if you get the ultimate foot chip, this means you have all the foot parts by default, which means the double jump and this nifty shadow dash that makes Zero invulnerable to enemies for a few seconds. Look at Zero go like the badass he is, and it's just great seeing how much of value you have to upgrading Zero from the moment you start playing, and it's something that makes 03 as a whole a great fucking game. You'll be swamped with so much stuff to have Zero use that you customize the way you want to play the game, allowing for multiple runs and different means of going through one stage. No Mega Man game prior to 03 even came close to this type of experience, and I didn't even talk about the EX skills either, which, yeah, like I said earlier, I don't think I need to because much like 02, I barely give it any time of day, and most of the moveset in your basic arsenal anyways is enough to deal damage for the long run. And it's weird for me to mention all of this because for as much as I love Mega Man 02, I mainly love it for its charm. Meanwhile, for as perfect as this game is specifically, I enjoy 03 in terms of its story and gameplay and just the whole freaking 9 yards. Boss fights were the funnest I had too, easily testing your skills as a Mega Man player while having their own fun in between to make for the most unique ones of the series out there. They're the most memorable from my experience since they have some personalities to them prior to encountering them, but I also have one small issue with them, and that's similar to the mini boss issue I mentioned earlier. There are just too fucking many of them, man, ranging from a total of 20 boss fights, including the Omega phases that are back to back. You even have this one secret phantom boss fight that doesn't blow up in your face this time around, so really let's say about 21 or so boss fights total. Seriously, while this adds more stages, the game is effectively longer and seemingly bloated to the point where you can burn out from how much they crammed in this freaking game. It's not obviously a serious issue, I get that, but when you're reviewing these games in a marathon and not so much just enjoying them for what they are, They can be tiresome and some don't really need to be a thing. I don't understand from a plot or even gameplay standpoint to revive old 01 bosses other than to show that Wild is throwing the entire book at you, and these revamped bosses weren't much of a challenge since they're the same as before. It feels like padding for the sake of padding, but besides that, everything else is good in my book. Again, they were unique enough to stand out and came equipped with heavy hand throwing that I can't peg them down a bit too much because their difficulty was good enough to keep the challenge going without needing to be excessive all the same. Though the boss rush was a complete nightmare, I will give it that, and I'm glad that with the number of upgrades I had by that point of the game, it was enough to say, hey, stop that. But by this point now and throughout the video, you all probably are wondering and asking yourself the obvious question here. How well does this game hold up today? And to answer that question honestly, it holds up pretty freaking well. To kind of make my point here for a second, while I love 02 a lot, that was because I love the improvement between 01 and 2 and how that game upped the formula and improved it drastically enough to feel like things were going through the motions. But with 03, it's just leagues better in the end. It's like comparing my thoughts to how despite how much I love Generation 4 Pokemon, Generation 5 Pokemon is effectively a better generation because of the things it improved and added on top of what already worked so well. 03 here is a better game, both subjectively and objectively, and it does a hell of a good job of highlighting the Zero series in its entirety. With a better combat system, the stages being more Mega Man coded, and both the Cyber Elves and part systems being a caliber above the previous entries, it's a game I have always gone back to and honestly never skipped a beat. Again, the save files do not lie, as I spent twice as much playing and replaying because of how much I missed from my first initial experiences. 03 will do that to you, and it's why again it has that sense of finality to it when you look back at the ending. Capcom knew that if this was the last of the series, they had to go all out, and that's why many Mega Man fans see it as the best of the Zero series and perhaps even the best of Mega Man period. It really is that great of an experience. But obviously we're not done yet here, as we have one final game to cover here for the Zero series. One game to truly cap off this marathon here, which is of course Mega Man 04. A game that actually wasn't supposed to be planned, which we'll talk more about as to why when we get to that video. As always, thank you guys so much for watching. Keep being awesome, keep spreading love and kindness to the world, keep having fun. Love you all to 120. As always, stay safe and sexy out there. Peace out and take care. Okay, that actually kind of hurt.